Hi everyone, this is Britt Simon. Today we've had the Visa Bulletin released for, it's essentially advance notice for um, the October interviews, right? So it's called the September Visa Bulletin. It's published in August and it affects October. You've got to love the way the American government likes to make things complicated, right? Um, so in the Visa Bulletin, there's a couple of things that we want to talk about for DV2024. First of all, is the Visa Bulletin itself, the case numbers that have become current, etc. What that means, when you're going to get your interview notice, if you're now current for interview, and those sort of things. We'll talk about that in a few moments. And then also in the Visa Bulletin was, as I hoped and expected, they've published the number of selectees in each country. And I'll show you that, and we can discuss what that really means as well, because that's going to be really important for us to understand how many selectees there are in each region. We can now sort of talk about high case numbers, whether they're at risk or not, and whether there are more holes and that sort of thing, right? So we'll talk about that. Now, because I'm doing this live, I know there are going to be some people that are asking questions about DV 2020 and DV 2021, like these questions, right? And there's probably going to be some questions about DV 2023 as well. So let me first of all address those questions, right? For DV 2020 and 2021, there's no news. We're still waiting for the appeal. There's nothing I can say about when that appeal will be finished. We just have to let the appeals court take their time. Okay, so there's really nothing to be said about that. I understand everybody's waiting, and it's extremely frustrating to see another year proceeding without DV 2020 and 2021 being being settled yet. But that's the way it's going to be, and really by now we should realize it's not going to be a fast process, right? So that's DV 2020 and 2021. No news. For DV 2023, it's essentially over as far as scheduling is concerned. Obviously, interviews are going to continue until into September. But just to quickly sort of recap what I discussed in a video the other day, KCC have overscheduled, in my opinion. They've scheduled too many cases. And there is going to be some sort of pressure between a number of things that could happen, right? In order to allow all of the cases that they've scheduled to go ahead and be issued visas for those cases that could be issued, they would have to say basically no 221G cases are going to get resolved. If they decide they're going to resolve some 221G cases, these are cases in administrative processing, if they do some of those in August, it will mean that as they go through September, they're definitely going to hit and exceed the cap, right? Which then means there's a question of how much past the cap are they willing to go this year? They went about nearly 900 cases past the cap last year. Are they going to allow that to happen this year, or are they going to be firm on the cap? The 55,000 cap I'm talking about, right? Are they going to be firm on that? And really, no one knows. None of us know, right? So we can talk about possibilities, but there's really no point in speculating. However, it is very, very obvious that there are too many cases scheduled. There's over 5,500 people in 221G. There are adjustment to status cases going on. There isn't enough visas to deal with all of those, right? Something's got to give, or they would exceed the 55,000 number by an enormous amount. They could probably, with all of the cases in 221G and the scheduled cases and adjustment to status, they could probably get to 59, 60,000 issued visas right now. That's how far over they've gone. It's crazy. Now, there are still a few embassies, like Colombo, like Nigeria, a couple of others that have received no September interviews. I don't believe they're going to receive any interviews. Those embassies, I don't think they're going to receive interviews. I think it's been about a week, just over a week, since we got the last significant number of 2NLs for September. The last were on the 31st of July. There were then two 2NLs released on, I think it was the 1st of August. And since that, there's been nothing more. We're now the 8th. So it's been at least a week since we've seen 2NLs. The Visa Bulletin that controls DV2024 is now released, and that's traditionally when the Visa Bulletin comes out, it shows that KCC have switched their processing to the next month, which in this case means the next year. And we've got the background of there's already too many visas, already too many scheduled interviews for September anyway. So too many cases have been issued. We're a week without any 2NLs. We've seen now the Visa Bulletin for 2024. I think it's fair to assume that we're not going to see any more 2NLs for DV 2023. Interviews will continue. Maybe some interviews could be cancelled in September. We don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But I don't think, if you're waiting for a 2NL, or if you're thinking I'm switching embassies, maybe I can get a 2NL from that other embassy, forget it. It's not going to happen, right? It's time now to accept that there's not going to be any 2NLs. Now, having said that, there is, in most years, there are some embassies which they've already got a few appointments set for September, and if they get a cancellation, they might go back to KCC and ask to fill that cancellation. We're talking one case, two cases, right? A couple of interview appointments. If that happens this year, KCC could easily turn around and say, no, we're not going to schedule anymore. But it could happen. So what I'm trying to say is, look, there's a very, very small chance that a few 2NLs over the next few weeks could come out. But don't rely on that. It's certainly not going to be any large number. And I would be significantly surprised if an embassy like Colombo, for example, got a reasonable batch of 2NLs. It just doesn't make sense that they do that. And there are some embassies that have not received any 2NLs this whole year, like Nigeria. The whole year has just been totally ignored. There's no simpler way to put it than that embassy just said screw you to everybody that locally. They just couldn't give a damn about DV, and unfortunately there's nothing we can do to stop them behaving like that. So that's it for DV 2023. That's all I want to say. There's a lot of unknowns, but you're just going to have to sort of live with that. Right, let's talk about the Visa Bulletin for 2023, and I know this is going to be a jolt for some of you to have this sort of disregard for DV 2023. It's not that at all. It's just this is the normal cadence, and this is exactly how I would have switched my conversation a year ago for DV 2023 from DV 2022. It's the same every year. Okay, so please don't get upset that I'm just ignoring DV 2023 now, because it's just normal. Okay, now for all other questions, for 2024 questions, please hold your questions, right? Let me just get through some explanations, and then towards the end we can talk about some questions. I'll take some questions, right? Okay, so this is the Visa Bulletin that's been released for DV 2024 October interviews. Africa 10,000 with some accepts. Asia 2,000, Europe 4,500, and then small numbers for Oceania and South America. The accept countries, if you don't know, what this means is, in Africa as a general concept, if your case number is under 10,000, then you're current. But if you're registered to your country of chargeability is Algeria, then your number is less than that. It's 7,500. If you're in Egypt, it's 5,500, and if you're in Morocco, it's 5,600, right? So these numbers are not added to the 10,000; they're below the 10,000. So it's like, if you start everyone, Africa goes up to 10,000, Egypt goes up to 5,500, Morocco goes to 5,600, and Algeria goes to 7,500. Right? It's within this number range, the 10,000 range. So that's how we look at accept. Why do they do that? Well, these countries that are in accept basis, let's take Nepal as an example. Nepal and Iran in Asia are normally the two countries which are limited in the draw. What it means is some countries have so many entries into the lottery that they get an enormous number of winners, and if they were not limited in some way during the draw, they would have numbers, enormous number of selectees, right? So during the draw, at some point, the government stopped picking cases from Nepal and Iran and some other countries, right? Asia is the easiest place to describe this concept with. So I choose Asia to explain that, right? That means that you've got more Nepal selectees than most other places in Asia, apart from Iran. And they're all concentrated in the lower case numbers, right? So Asia as a whole might go to 52,000, but Nepal is probably going to run out at numbers. You'll have to tell me, I don't know the numbers yet, but probably around about between 25 and 30,000, right? So all of the Nepalese candidates are in that earlier number range. Now, because of that, and because the Nepalese cases go for interview in Kathmandu, all in one place, they have to restrict the number of people made current in Nepal and Iran in order to not do too many cases too quickly. It slows down that country, allowing that one embassy that does all of that work to organize their work a little bit better. And in recognition that at the same point that we get to, let's say, 90% of Nepal cases, we should also be at 90% of Asia cases in theory. That's theoretically how it works. Now, in reality, it doesn't work quite like that because quotas are met. But that's kind of the concept, right? So that's going to be the same thing for Algeria, Egypt, and Morocco. So Algeria and Morocco in particular in DV2023 did a fantastic job of scheduling their cases. But we know that those countries are restricted in the draw, and they don't have the highest case number. So the highest case number for Africa could be 122,000. That's what we think it is. That sort of number, that sort of range. But Algeria's highest case is going to be lower than that, right? Same thing for Egypt. Egypt, I understand, has numbers up until about 90,000. I don't know Algeria's highest number. I don't know Morocco's, but they're probably restricted below that. And all the Algerians, or a very, very high percentage of them, and a very high percentage of Moroccans, go to one embassy. They go to Algeria. They go to Morocco. And so they want to spread that workload out over the year by restricting the number of people made current in each visa bulletin. That's what accept means. I hope that's a little bit clearer for you. So with these case numbers, if your case is now under these case numbers, according to either your country or your region, under these numbers. So case number 10,000 is not current in Africa. 9,999 is current, right? Now, if you've got case number 9,999, you may be able to get your 2NL for October if your DS260 is fully processed. And also if your embassy has got capacity, right? So that's how it works. You have to have your DS260 processed, you have to be current, and then your embassy sets a capacity for how many interviews they can give in any given month, right? And initially, I don't get too excited about the first visa bulletin. I don't try and make a prediction based on the numbers made current in the first visa bulletin, or the second, or even the third. it really doesn't say anything about the highest case number that we'll get to based on the case numbers we're seeing in the first Visa Bulletin. They have no feedback yet. So it's early days. Don't try and do some sort of math based on these numbers. Don't try and look at previous years. None of that is worth doing. It's completely pointless. Just accept these numbers for what they are and know that some people in the region will be interviewed, and that's great, right? And DS260 processing is done, basically the cases are opened in the order received, right? Regardless of case numbers. So there are some cases in Africa, let's say at 20, 30, 40,000 or whatever, who have been processed but are clearly not current, right? So if your case has been processed, if you've emailed KCC and they come back saying your DS260 has been processed, you're just now waiting to be current, it doesn't mean that you can get an interview. You have to wait until your number is also current, right? Right. So there you go. Now, all right. So that's what I want to talk about for the Visa Bulletin, for the numbers and for the scheduling. We'll see the first 2 NLs coming out to October, for October interviews, probably in the next couple of days. Where the Visa Bulletin is released late, like the 13th, 14th, 15th, I normally expect the first 2 NLs to come out that same day or very often the next day, right? Where the Visa Bulletin is released at the beginning of the time period, because the time period for Visa Bulletin releases is between the 8th and the 15th of each month, right? Whereas at the beginning, like today, where it's the 8th, KCC won't have had so much time to pre-work and set up the interviews, right? They wouldn't have had access to these numbers very early at all, if at all. And so they are now saying, okay, Africa 10,000, Asia 2,000, fine, we'll go and arrange the interviews. So they're starting to do that now. And it'll probably be a couple of days before we see any 2 NLs come out. Now, we don't have access to the SEAC data, so we're not going to know which 2 NLs are coming out. But I'd highly appreciate it if you can let me know at my blog, britsimonsays.com, when you get your 2 NL, so that I can see where the activity is happening. Which region are you in? What's your case number range approximately? And which embassy are you at? Okay. It's also helpful to know, by the way, when you submitted your DS260. That's so date of submission is not that important, but it's really the date of processing. But when processing is completed, that's important. But the date of submission obviously helps to know when some cases at least will be processed, right? Okay, so that's the October stuff. Now, the other thing is we have this statement about the DV2024 results, and we have the per country number of selectees, right? So a couple of interesting tidbits in here. They tell us that there's 143,000 selectees for DV2024. That's a lot. It's 24,000 more, or more than 10% more than in DV2023 and DV2022. Both of which were oversubscribed years, selected years, right? So they've selected even more. This is the highest number I've seen selected. In 2014, my year, they selected 140,000. I think 2015 was 125,000. Those were the 2 record years in my recollection. And so in the last 10 years or so, this is certainly the highest number by far. Some years have been as low as 83,000. So 143,000 is a lot. Okay, now it's not double the 119,000, and I'll come back to that point because some of the case numbers that we're seeing are almost double what we're seeing in some regions. I want to talk about that. Other information in here, there were 22 million qualified entries. Now, that's a stunning number. That's the highest number I've seen. It was so high, I thought that they were talking about entries with derivatives as well, but this is, I believe, just entries because they're using the same terminology. Now, to give you an idea, that number in DV 2023 was 9 million something. So over double the number of entries in DV2024 than DV2022. What does that mean? Well, it means you had half as much chance to be selected this year than in previous years. So if you have been selected, you should understand that your chance of selection was probably something like 1 in 200 or worse in Africa, let's say. Now, what does that mean? Once in 200 years, you stand the chance of being selected with these sort of numbers, maybe 250 years. So if you've been selected, please understand what an amazing opportunity, an amazing chance this is. But also just be realistic about the fact that there are 143,000 selectees. Not everyone is going to get the chance this year. Okay, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment. Okay, other stuff, normal stuff here. Nothing really sort of important here. They talk about the NACARA program. That's a slight reduction in the number of visas available, but NACARA is not using anything, so there's 55,000 visas available. That's what it is. They make the point that you're not entitled to an interview. You're not entitled to a visa. This is a process with no guarantees, right? So please don't go and sell your car. Don't go and sell, give up your job, sell your house. Please understand that there are going to be many thousands of people that are going to be disappointed this year. There are 55,000 visas and 143,000 people are selected for those 55,000 visas. The 143,000 number will increase over the year because some people will get married, some people will have babies, and the 143,000 increases by quite a lot. So it'll be almost 3 times the number of visas available by the time the year is completed. So please understand there are going to be some people with challenges this year. Then we can look at the numbers. Now, let's just clarify these numbers as we see 5,142. What does that mean? That's the number of selectees, including spouses and children, right? So that's probably something like 2,500 cases on which 5,142 people are included, including the winner themselves and the spouse and the children. Roughly in Africa, the number is a bit less than 2. In other regions, the number is 2. And that number is the derivative rate. So it's the average number of people on each case, right? That's what we call the derivative rate. And it's a little bit less than 2 in Africa and a little bit more than 2 in Asia and Europe, typically. That just varies on whether people generally get married in some countries or not. In Africa, the behavior tends to be, for example, let's take Ghana, which has about 2,000 selectees this year. Ghana has probably one of the lowest number of derivatives, for each of the cases. Their derivative rate is about 1.2. So that speaks to the behavior, 2,088 selectees, including derivatives. So they've got something like 1,700 cases, roughly. I'm just doing the math in my head, so I could be wrong, but 1,700 cases. And on those cases, there are another 300 or 400 people who are derivatives. Okay, that's what that means. In other countries, there might be more marriages, more married applicants, etc. But in countries like Ghana, where there's a very low number of selectees who are married, we tend to see more marriages going on during the process, which is perfectly okay. It's legal. If you're dating someone and you can't imagine going to America without them, then it's perfectly normal to say, okay, I want to spend my life with you. Let's get married so that we can both go through this process together. That's not illegal at all. What is illegal is your best friend has got a sister. She's a bit ugly, but that's okay. He's offering you $5,000 to marry her and include her in your process. All of that is totally illegal, and she's ugly anyway. So why would you do that? Don't do that, right? And actually, I'll just leave the whole ugly thing there. I'll just leave it there. Okay, so you can see some of the things here. There's a few surprises in these numbers. Afghanistan is quite a high number, a high number of selectees. Typical that Iran takes the most selectees in Asia. That's been that way for quite some time. And Nepal is at 3,800. Nepal has a lower number of selectees than Iran, but that again is due to the number of people married, right? And as you know, if you're a Nepalese or if you know of Nepal society, there will be more single people, young single people in this process from Nepal than is typical in Iran. So the case numbers between those two countries are probably about the same. Now, there is a cutoff that happens, and we can see the cutoff number usually by Africa. This year, we can see it actually more clearly in Europe. Russia is at 55.14, and Uzbekistan is at 55.55. So the cutoff is about 5,500 this year in terms of the most number of selectees that a country could get. But funnily enough, there could be cutoff countries that have much less than that because they have less derivatives, more holes, and that sort of thing. Okay, so I just mentioned, a couple of other things about Oceania's got a huge number of selectees. I'm going to come to that in a minute. So does South America. So let's think which order to deal with this in. I want to show you the spreadsheet, I think. Okay, this is a spreadsheet I want to show you, which just illustrates how many more selectees we have in this year compared to DV 2023, right? So in each of the regions, I've got here the number of selectees for DV 2023. There are a total of 119,262 selectees in DV 2023. And as we know, that was too many, right? There are going to be about 75,000 people were scheduled for interview. That's too many. And that means that there were 25 or 30,000 people at least that filled in their DS260s, wanted to go through the process, but didn't get a chance, right? And then there's a 24,000 increase for this year. But the increase is not the same in each of the regions. It's not like they've applied the same increase number to the different regions. They're actually very, very different. So Africa has increased by 12%, or about 5,000 and something cases, selectees. Asia has increased by just over 16%. EU increased by 25%. OC increased by 77%. And South America by 51%. Now, this is, frankly, terrible news, particularly for OC, high case numbers, and also for South America, high case numbers, because there is no justification at all to say why there should be an increase of 77%, almost doubling of the number of selectees for OC. So if you're an Oceania, high case number, then you've got reason to be worried. And in fact, my advice to some people with high case numbers would be don't even file your DS260. It's that bad. It's that obvious that that we're not going to get to high case numbers. Talking about high case numbers, I've got the highest case number for each of the regions for DV 2023, and then the highest reported case number for DV 2024. Those are the DV 2024 numbers are not solid at the moment. They're just people report them to me or to various forums, etc. I gather this information. This could be inaccurate, right? So, but we think that Africa's highest case number is going to be at least 122,000 because there's at least one case I know of with that number. Asia seems to be up to about 52,000. I've heard some at about 45, 46,000. I did see the 52,000 reported from what I consider to be a reliable source, so I'm taking that number. It could be wrong. EU, in some Russian forums, which are very good, Russian-speaking forums, I should say. Those forums are very good at gathering data. They're good with numbers in that part of the world, obviously. So there are some people in those forums with case numbers of 66, 67,000, and 69,000 is the highest that I've heard reported, and it's fairly trustworthy. In OC, the highest case number I've seen reported, I've had several case numbers at 46, 47, 4,800, and a couple at 4,900. And then I had one guy who reported receiving a 6,800 number. I think there's a misunderstanding about that 6,800 number, so I'm ignoring it. I'm treating it as an outlier, saying that I don't think it really exists. But it could be true. I mean, I don't mean to disrespect that particular gentleman, but I'm just ignoring it because it doesn't tie up with anything. There is no case I've heard of between 4,900 and 6,800 in Oceania. And if you ever want to read about something interesting, you can read about German battle tank theory. Google it, it's on the internet. And essentially, you should be hearing about numbers in all the ranges up until the maximum. And there is a decrease that you would expect, but there shouldn't be a complete gap in those numbers. So German battle tank theory tells me that because there are no numbers in the 5,000 range, no numbers in the 6,000 range, then that number at 6,800 is probably a mistake in some way. But I think Oceania goes to about 4,900. And I think South America is at least 5,000. It may be higher. I think it's probably higher. Now, let's just deal with the two easier ones first, which is Oceania and South America. I'm going to focus on those two to start with. Then I'm going to talk about Africa, Asia, and Europe, right? Because the Oceania and South America are clearly the most at risk and clearly easier to understand in a way. Now, in DV 2023, the final cutoff for the numbers was, let me just make a note here, it's 2023, was these numbers here, right? This is, oops, okay. Final cutoff. Okay, right. Africa was current. Asia was cut off at 21,000. That was their final highest number. Europe 32,000, OC at 25, and South America at 3,150. Now, I then also looked at how many cases were above those current numbers in each of the regions. None were above the current number in Africa. In Asia, 5,100 cases, not people, cases. So that's about 10,000 people. Didn't even become current, right? 3,500 cases in Europe, 344 in Oceania, and 9, would you believe, 9 in South America. That's very frustrating for those 9 cases. So that was 3,158 was the highest case number in South America, and they stopped the numbers at 3,150. So basically 9 cases only didn't get current in South America. So let's talk about Oceania for a minute. 344 cases, which would be about 700 people, right? So in DV 2023, 2,500 people were selected, and that was about 700 people too many, right? So essentially, we're saying that in DV 2023, about 1,800 people were needed in order to meet the quota, right? We've got 4,450 people selected in DV 2024. It's a massive increase, and there's no justification for it because the quotas haven't changed for Oceania. We're not going to see a higher quota. There's still the same number of visas available, which is about 850 roughly. So 1,800 people are needed in order to reveal or obtain 850 issued visas. Then why have they selected 4,450? It makes no sense. And what it means is that we are definitely 100% certain we are going to see high case numbers losing out. There's no doubt about that. Now, if you're in any number range above 2,500, in Oceania, you're probably in trouble. It could be a number a little bit lower than that, but the number in DV2023 is, it's about that. Could be, so it's around that number. If you're in the 3,000s and the 4,000 range, it doesn't look good at all. I see no reason why things would go that far. Now, the only sort of saving grace that some of you may have is that if you look at the Selectee numbers, Australia is just under 800, I think 795 selectees, and Fiji is 2,900. So if something happened that caused many Fijians to not proceed, it would take some big political upheaval or sort of some massive problem different to DV 2023, a problem that knocks out a lot of those 2,900 people. If that happened, then other countries in Oceania might have more of a chance. But without something like that happening, then high case numbers have pretty much had it. Okay, and I know in Oceania, you'd probably rather hear it straight, right? So that's me talking straight. Cases in 4,000 range, forget about it. You're not going to get current. 3,000 range is probably not going to get current, and even the 2,000 range is probably somewhat at risk. Okay, in South America, same sort of story, not quite as bad. They had a 50% increase. I don't get it. 51% increase. I don't understand why. They went from 3,500 selectees in DV 2023 to 5,300 this year. Makes no sense, but it's going to end up with the same sort of car crash that we're going to see in Oceania. The quota for South America is about 1,500. So in DV 2023, they essentially needed about 3,500 people being current in order to get to the quota or just exceed the quota a little bit. And so that's all we'll probably need in DV 2024, which means roughly speaking, the top third of numbers will probably be too many, roughly, right? It could go a little bit higher or a little bit lower than that. Now, I don't know. I'm not feeling very confident about this this case number. You may know, if you're in South America, you may know of case numbers higher or lower than that. But let me know if you know those numbers. So I'm a little bit. I can't sort of be as confident that I know the number. I'm much more confident in the Oceania number because I've had lots of Oceania selectees reporting their numbers to me on BritSimonSays.com. Right. So okay. So those two regions, I think, are absolutely certain, 100% certain, to have a cutoff in place at the end of the year, similar to what we saw in DV 2023. I mean, it's just no doubt about that. I mean, you'd have to see some sort of miracle to even make a dent in that, right? Okay, so let's talk about the other regions. Now, Africa is an interesting one. I think I'll come back to Africa. Keep the suspense going for Africans. Let's talk about Asia. In DV 2023, there were 24,000 selectees, but 5,100 of them were not necessary, right? It really only took 19,000 selectees to actually reach the limit, right? DV 2023, Iranian applicants were very highly impacted this year by administrative processing. And we just don't know whether that's going to continue or not. It's frankly unusual. They've done better in previous years. There's always a long period of AP for Iranian cases. That's just normal. It's been that way for a long time, and we can talk about why that is, But frankly, for Iranians, look to your own government to talk about why that is. Right? It's your own government's behaviour that causes that more than anything else. And you should know that. If you're an Iranian, you should know that they don't behave well in the world stage. They don't cooperate with America. They don't make records available. And so therefore, and they're also quietly at war with America as far as they're concerned. They think they are. And so if you're Iranian, it's not a surprise that America takes more care and has to spend more time, frankly, on performing background checks on your case, right? That's what happens. So it can take 4 or 5 months for an Iranian case, particularly with an Iranian male in the case. It can take 4 or 5 months for that case to be approved, if at all, after the interview. So there's a big risk for Iranians, right? Now, Iranians are the single biggest group of selectees in Asia, and so as goes Iran, so does so does the rest of Asia. It's a bigger impact to Asia. Nepal will take all of its selectees. It's got a selectee number that is within the number that they will have in order for Nepal to go current, right? So that's one prediction. Nepal will go current. If whatever case number you've got in Nepal, I'd like to know that case number, how high they go, but you don't really need to worry about getting current or not, because apart from maybe the last 50 cases or something, they'll all go current, okay? For Iran, your issue is more about whether you can be interviewed early enough in order to have that 4 or 5 months of processing after the interview. That's going to be your biggest issue. So low case numbers in Iran have a better chance. But frankly, no Iranians have got a great chance in the lottery right now, based on how the American government behaved in DV2023, right? Where will the cutoff be, if there's a cutoff for DV 2024? I think because there's this increase, 16% increase, so an extra 4,000 selectees on top of the 5,000 that weren't needed in DV 2023, it's obvious there's going to be a cutoff again, right? I mean, it's pretty obvious that will happen, no matter what goes on with Iran. But depending on what goes on with Iran, will affect whether that, where that cutoff comes exactly. Okay. So that's Asia. For EU, for Europe, massive increase, 25%, 10,000 extra selectees. And we already had 3,500 cases. Oh, these are cases, by the way. This 5,100 for Asia, that was 10,000 people, right? So this is Europe having 3,500 cases that never got current. That's 7,000 people, right? So 7,000 people out of the 40,000 didn't become current in DV 2023. So we only needed 33,000 in order to get to the numbers we've got, which are basically the quota. So again, that's going to, and they've increased the numbers by 25%. So again, the top third, roughly the top 25 or 30% of cases at least, are in a risky zone in Europe. We're going to have a cutoff in Europe. There is some impact from the fact that Ukraine and Russia are still having their political problem, shall we say. That affects nearly 10,000 people in just those two countries. Then you've got Uzbekistan, which is the other large sort of player in Europe. They're a pretty big one, and Turkey's another big one as well. Turkey was underperforming. Turkey embassy underperformed in DV 2023, so that will be a big part of the story in DV 2024. Does that behavior continue? We don't really know how that's going to work out, but we'll have to see how it goes. But clearly, if you're in the highest case numbers, if you're like in the 60,000 range in Europe, and possibly if you're in the 50,000 range in Europe, you've got reason to worry. Okay, so consider carefully whether you even want to submit your DS-260. Okay. Okay, Africa. Now, Africa is an interesting one. It went current in DV 2023. So in other words, with the 49,000 selectees that we had, there were not enough people to fill the quota. They're substantially lower than the quota. Now, Africa got the most cases scheduled. It is not true to say that the American government is ignoring African cases. no other region got as many cases scheduled as Africa. But because of the derivative rate for Africa, those additional cases didn't result in a higher issuance rate, right? So, so Africa, even with 49,000 selectees, didn't meet its quota. Its quota being about 24,000. And so, and the story's not over yet, but I already know it's not going to meet that quota, right? It's very obvious from the numbers we're looking at. So a 12% increase would seem to be sensible in a way, but until you understand why Africa didn't meet its quota with the 49,000 selectees. And the main story about that was the misbehavior of some specific embassies, which just didn't do enough work, right? And I'm talking about embassies like Addis, like Nairobi, like Accra, like Cairo, actually, and some other embassies in Nigeria, namely, obviously that's going to be a different story now with the political problems there. But there were certain embassies that just misbehaved, and that ruined the chances for thousands of people. So of the 49,000 people selected in DV 2023, they didn't all have the same chance because some embassies wiped out the chances for at least 10, possibly 15,000 of those selectees, right? So if everything suddenly turned happy and wonderful and all of the embassies suddenly started behaving well in Africa, then we would have cutoffs. We wouldn't get to the highest case number ranges. However, I don't think things are going to just turn around overnight, like on on September 30th, a pumpkin appears, and all of a sudden, on October 1st, all of the embassies that misbehaved in all the previous years, like DV 2020, 21, 22, and 23, I don't think those embassies are suddenly going to start behaving well, right? Now, some may behave a little bit better, some won't, and so it's very difficult to make an assessment. It is not necessary to have 55,000 selectees for Africa. Actually, I should have made this bigger a long time ago. I'm sorry, I'll just make that bigger now, just so you can see that. It isn't necessary to have 55,000 selectees in Africa. We don't need that many selectees, but we may need that many selectees if we're to get closer to the quota and have the same misbehavior from some embassies. So the story is not about the numbers, it's more about the behavior of the embassies, right? So, and I mentioned Africa, I mentioned Accra earlier, 2,088 selectees, which is about 1,700 cases. So if you were to try and schedule all of those 1,700 cases, you would need to be doing about 140 cases per month, right? And Accra, throughout all of DV 2023, we're doing between 25 and 30 cases per month. There's 1 month where they took 50 cases, but then they took none the next month. So it was basically a double month in one, right? So if they continue with this 25 case a month or 30 cases a month bullshit, then there will be cases in Accra that will want an interview and won't get a chance. But if they could go to like 50 or 60 or 70 cases a month, then we might have more of a chance for everyone in Accra, because of course not every one of the 2,088 selectees are going to want to continue, right? Some of them won't have the money. They realize that they don't really want to take this opportunity or whatever. They won't all continue. But let's say 1,700 of those, or let's say 1,800 of those continue, of which 1,500 are real cases. You would still need to see something like 120 interviews per month, right? So I don't think we're going to get to that point, but we'll have to wait and see what what really happens there. But Africa, like I say, Africa is a story about the embassy behavior, not about the selectee number. That's why it's a little bit different. And the other thing that we can say from these numbers, by the way, particularly in Africa, is there's been a question over the last few weeks since the results came out of why the case numbers are so high. And I was giving a couple of explanations. There were three possible explanations to this. Number one, there was a massive increase in selectee numbers that essentially doubled the case numbers in Africa, let's say, because there were double the number of selectees. And that isn't the case. We can see now that isn't the case in Africa. Or there was a lot more holes, and those two are sort of linked. There's either more selectees or there's a lot more holes, right? So option number two was there's a lot more holes, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And option number three was some combination of the two, right? Now, Africa is the clearest example that there are more holes in DV2024. There's some additional security thing that has caused more holes, but there's also more selectees, right? So 12% increase and roughly a doubling of case numbers for Africa. But in Oceania, there's a 77%, nearly 78% increase in selectee numbers. And that's primarily the reason why the case numbers have gone up so much, from 2,600 or 2,800 to 4,900, right? So yes, there are more holes, but not dramatically more holes. It's really a selectee problem in Oceania. Now, what causes that, right? So we can only speculate about this. So I can explain this, but what are holes to start with? Well, holes are created in number ranges when, before the results are actually released, they take some cases and they disqualify those cases because those cases have made terrible mistakes, maybe, in their entry. Now, we're not talking about you picked high school education or no education at all or whatever. We're not talking about those sort of mistakes. We're not talking about you're single but you chose married or vice versa, or you missed off one of your kids. Those things will not cause you to be disqualified before the results. They don't create holes. What creates holes is things like suspicion of multiple entries, right? So you've entered more than one time, or photos that don't meet the requirements, right? Now, Oceania as a region has probably got less of those sort of two main problems I just mentioned, photos and multiple entries. They've probably got less of that problem than Africa, right? And again, I'm not dissing Africa, I'm just saying reality, right? In Africa, there are a lot of agencies and, sort of scumbags, frankly, who register a lot of people charging a fee and then rip them off later. And I think the government has gone after some of those agencies a little bit and has disqualified entries from people who went through agencies like that, particularly in Africa. And that accounts for the high number of holes. There could also be a new algorithm that detects photos which don't meet the requirements. And I have seen government information about the improvement of face detection software that they use in order to go through and sift out the irregular photos in this process. And they are getting very, very good at that software, right? So they're able to identify people through the photos who have got multiple entries. That's one thing they can do. And they can look at the photos and say, yeah, this photo doesn't match the requirements because it's not a human face with eyes at this point and a mouth at this point or whatever. What we actually have here is a donkey's butt, right? And so therefore we're going to knock this case out, right? So I think it's highly likely that the photo recognition technology has improved to the point where it's creating more holes, and that's why it's affecting Africa more than it's affecting Oceania, right? And so that's why we're seeing a difference in between the regions on the increase in holes versus the increase in selectee numbers. Okay, so that's pretty much where I wanted to get to. Now, I'm going to ignore all the questions from before, because if you didn't listen to me where I said don't ask me questions, then tough luck. I might just have a quick scan and see if there's any good questions in here. And let me just sort of let me take this first one. Please can you give the explicit number that you think is in risk in Asia, right? Now, look, pay attention, please. I can't be explicit at this point because I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know how people are going to behave in Asia over the next 12 months, right? I don't know how the government's going to react. I don't know what world political problems are going to happen in Asia. So how the heck you expect me to be explicit in the number at this point, a year ahead of time? I just don't know. I don't even know why you would ask that question, frankly. It's a ridiculous question. This is all just estimation at this point, right? We don't even have the SEAC data that would make this a bit more scientific. This is just estimation, gut reaction, based on my 10 years of experience in this process. But I can't be explicit. Of course I can't. Grow up. That can't possibly happen. Please understand that that's a ridiculous question. So I can't give you an exact number, an explicit number where the cutoff will be. It's a year away from now, right? So please, come on, let's be obvious. Now, on the other end of the scale, do you think Asia will go current this year in DV2024? I've just spent a long time, I think probably 55 minutes, explaining why there's such a risk for regions like Asia. The only region that I think may have a chance of going current is Africa. All the other regions, I believe, won't go current, just like DV2023, effectively. There are too many selectees. It's quite simple. There are more selectees this year than there were in DV2023. And in DV2023, apart from Africa, none of the regions got current. South America got very, very close, within 9 cases. But South America has increased by 50, 51, nearly 52% number of selectees. So South America is not going to get current this year, and no other region is going to get current. Africa is the only one that could possibly get current, and that will only happen if embassies continue to be idiots. That's basically the answer there. Certainly Asia is not going to get current. Okay, other questions then. Case number is 45K in Africa in 2024. Am I safe? Is this a low case number? Okay, Kenya specifically. 45K in Africa, you have to try and, in Africa in particular, you have to try and imagine what that was like compared to DV 2023. Your 45K number is probably something like a 28,000, maybe 30,000 number in DV 2023. And everything got current in DV 2023. So if I was sitting there with a 45K case number in Africa, I'd feel pretty confident. I mean, 100% confident. Just a matter of common sense. You should see that we've only increased by 12%. And so it's only going to be the highest case numbers that have real risk. And all of that is based on the embassy behavior. Now, if the embassy suddenly started behaving properly, all of them, then we would have to talk about how many cases would be at risk at that point. Then we would be talking about cases of probably 60,000, 70,000 as being the beginning risky range, right? Probably, but you can't be precise about this, and I really don't believe that the embassies are suddenly going to get nice. Now your wife is panicking with EU 50,000. Yeah, she's got a little bit of a reason to panic. EU is, despite the problems in Russia and Ukraine, the embassies that have supported Russia and Ukraine have done an amazing job, and they're doing very, very well. And so, generally speaking, the homelessness that's being experienced by Ukraine and Russian applicants is not causing them a problem. They're still getting lots of visas issued. So Europe as a whole is doing okay, probably with the notable exception of Turkey, funnily enough. I don't know why that is. I don't know why that happened. Ankara, I don't know what's going on in Ankara, to be honest. They're doing some weird stuff. I don't understand why they're working as they did. They could change. That could get better in DV 2024. But yeah, EU 50K could be a little bit risky. Can't be precise, obviously, but that's the way it is. DV 2024, high case number of 57K. Okay, I was about to say it's not high. You are from Egypt, So it's a little bit higher than it should be because you're 57K out of about 90K instead of 57K out of 122, right? But still, you're a lot lower than the highest case numbers in Egypt, so you're probably not at risk, right? OCR submitted DS260. Number is on the cutoff date in September. When will they process my DS260? This month or next month on September? I don't know, Bill. It depends when. So the day you submit your DS260 is important from the point of view of when they open it. But every case is different. So some DS260s will take a few weeks, 2 or 3 weeks to process. Another case could take 2 or 3 months. So it depends on your travel history. It depends on your profession. Depends on your, where you live. Depends on your name, and depends on people that you may know. Right? Depends on a lot of factors. And so, generally speaking, if you're an Aussie or a Kiwi or something, you probably don't have a very long delay to get processed. The information systems for those sort of countries are very well connected, and they can process those cases very well, and there's no terrorism concerns and that sort of thing. So, you're probably, if you submitted your case in the first few days, and your case number is low, then you've got a chance. You're in the first 200 cases. That's awesome. Good luck to you. You've got a chance for an October interview if you submitted your DS260 early, very early, in the first week or two after selection. Okay, gut reaction I've just given a hood. At what point in the process should I start working on getting the I-134? Wait until you've got your 2NL. You can have the discussion with the person who's going to provide the I-134 for you, but I wouldn't get the I-134 together until you get your interview notification, which is the 2NL. Okay, that's just me. Please repeat me. I have a big case number, 84K in Algeria. Is there any hope? I don't know. I don't know whether there is a cutoff for sure in Algeria in terms of the selection process. So I don't know whether you're 84K and Algerians go to 122,000, or whether you're 84K and Algerians go to 85,000. I don't know. I don't know those numbers, right? You need to speak to other Algerians and figure out the highest case numbers you've heard of from Algerians, okay? 2024 case number AF 59K, not a problem. Abu Dhabi embassy, bit of a problem. Do I have a chance for interview in this embassy? Thanks for your valuable video. So it's not a particularly high case number, and Abu Dhabi is not terrible. But I must admit, if I were in that position, I would probably be thinking, where would I be better off, right? Now, if you have connection with another country, let's say you've got family or you've got business opportunities, and if you could move to that country because you've got family connections and that sort of thing, then frankly, I would consider doing that. If you can go to another country, live in that other country, if you've got permission to live in that other country, it's very important, then you don't write to KCC and say, hey, I hear Algeria is doing great. I'm in Abu Dhabi. I'm a bit nervous about Abu Dhabi, so please switch me to Algeria embassy. You don't do that. In fact, if you do that, you actually make your situation much worse. What you do is you move to that other country, you establish residence there, and then you are entitled to be interviewed in that other country, right? Now, that might sound ridiculous to some of you that you're going to move to another country, but this is a once-in-a-lifetime chance, and for some of you that choose not to do that, you're probably going to lose out because you're at embassies that will just misbehave all year. So, the choice is yours, and some DV2023 applicants are learning that choice and the impacts of that the hard way, I'm afraid. What does it mean by going current? It's when your case number is below the number shown in the Visa Bulletin, and therefore you are able to be interviewed. You're entitled to be interviewed as long as your DS260 is processed and as long as your embassy is working. AF96K is at a higher CN according to yeah, it is a high case number. Will that matter or not? Depends on what the embassies in Africa do. Okay. AS19K is at a high case number? Not particularly, no. How do you see 69K Addis Ababa? similar sort of conversation to the one I just had. I think I've answered that. Case number is Africa 100K. Is there any chance to be interviewed? Again, it's about the African embassies, whether they misbehave or not. If they misbehave, then higher case numbers have got more chance in other countries, right? Other than the misbehaving countries. If those embassies don't misbehave, if they operate well from the beginning of the year, then higher case numbers will lose out, and people at those previously misbehaving countries will get through, right? And it's all about that in Africa. It's about those misbehaving embassies. Okay. Case number AF 36K, but located in Europe. Do I have a chance? No problem at all. Doesn't matter that you're in Europe. It doesn't make any difference. You still will be current according to the Africa Visa Bulletin. 99K from Algeria. That's interesting. 5142 Selectees, highest case number 143K in Algeria. Holy shit. Okay, so that's two bits of information. Number one, 143K in Africa. Because it's just you reporting it to me, I can't really trust that number immediately. But it's somewhat interesting, right? But if that's true, that's very interesting. And the fact that Algeria goes up that high, that's really staggering. With that number of selectees, I thought they would be limited earlier. So we'll have to see if that's confirmed. We'll only know that for sure on January 1 of next year when we have the data from SIAC. Saha, the old man. The old man, no, is that what it's called? Olmer, yeah. Thanks for the efforts, my dear friend. But people come on, yeah, but come on, people, honestly, there is only one thing I can't understand with all the great jobs you do. Only got 17 likes. Is that right? I've only got 17 likes? No, 20 likes now. Good grief. Come on. I deserve more likes than that for an hour of my time. But anyway, great to see you, Saha. And if you're an Arabic speaker, by the way, please go and Google Saha's channel, because he's got great information. He's one of the YouTubers that is open and honest, and even when people don't like to hear bad information or don't like to hear realistic information, he's honest with people, and that counts as something. There are some YouTubers that will just blow wind up your ass and tell you anything you want to hear, but it's not true, and or they just don't know what they're talking about, and there's many of those. So Saha is not in either of those categories, and he's an Arabic speaker, so he can speak to a great many of you in your own language, and that's useful. So thank you for your efforts too, Saha. Okay. Are holes among the 143K selectees? Okay. I wonder if that's why the 143K in Algeria was mentioned, because it's the same number there. I wonder. I'd like to know whether you're getting confused with the selectee number rather than the case number. Are holes among the 143K selectees for 2024? Please clarify. Okay, holes exist within case numbers, not within selectees, right? So they're two different things. You don't take holes and apply them to selectee numbers. There are 143,000 people selected. They're real people, all of them. None of them are actually holes, right? They're actually humans. They're real people. They're not donkeys. They're not cats. They're people, right? That's people, including the family of the main selectees. Holes exist between case numbers. So I've got 10 numbers, right? 10 numbers. The first 10 numbers. Now, let's say number 1 through 10 are real numbers, but they've disqualified 1 and 2 and 5 and 7 and 10 or whatever. So there's some numbers that are holes. They've been disqualified, right? They're no longer there. So that's what holes is about. They're about case numbers. That's not about selectees. Now, if you're case number 5 or your case number 6 or whatever, your case number 6, you could be on there yourself, or you might be married and you might have 14 children. That means there's 16 people on case number 6, right? So that's how it works. holes has got nothing to do with selectees. It's to do with case numbers, right? Okay. AS19K, high case number, no. EU66K, should I re-enter the lottery? Oh, great question. Because of your high case number, you certainly should re-enter the lottery. No, it won't make any problems for your case should you ever get current in DV2024, although you probably won't get current. Everybody that's been selected, whether you've got a high case number or a low case number, everybody should consider re-entering DV2025. Why not? It's free. You don't know what's going to happen. Just enter, right? It doesn't affect your existing win in any way, shape, or form. Okay, so just enter. And sorry, by the way, to be so blunt as to say you're probably not going to get current. I just prefer being honest. You're probably not going to get current. So, and you can see from the numbers, you can see why. Submitted DS260 form without passport, national identity, and yes, that's no problem. There's not a question there, but that's no problem. You don't have to use a passport. When's the best time to start authenticating documents and do medical? When you've got your 2NL, you do your medical. Authenticating documents, you might want to do that a little bit earlier, depending on how long it takes in your country and whether documents need to be authenticated in your country or not. I don't know. So make a common sense decision. Use your own judgment about that, right? Emmanuel from Ghana with case number 15K plus. When can I go current for 2NL? I filled my DS260, 24th of May, 2023. Right. You'll probably go current in November or December, right? They move the Visa Bulletin up in numbers each month a little bit, so they don't have to. They could go 10,000 in October, and they could stay at 10,000 in November. It's possible, but it's likely that they'll move that number up a little bit. So you'll be current in November. Now, if you're a single person and your case was submitted fairly quickly, not really quickly, but quickly-ish, then there's a chance that you'll have been processed by November and therefore, or in time for November scheduling, and therefore you'll get a November interview, if not probably more like a December interview, okay? So that's roughly what will happen. And you're in Accra, right? So that's dependent on the number of cases that they take. If they restrict it to 25 cases, then it could be January or February before you get an interview, but you should be okay. Got a low case number there. Do I feel comfortable with the number of AS 33,000? Yeah, ish, sort of, not entirely comfortable. What if you put city of birth as Kigali, passport since birth is Kasaba? Kasaba is one of 3 districts in Kigali city, I guess. If you said you live in a city of Kigali and there are 3 districts that make up Kigali, you could have been more precise, but it doesn't matter. You've given the city name. It's fine. It's okay. As long as the place that you put is within Kigali city and you say Kigali, then that's fine, right? When will we have enough data to predict the highest case number, and from where do we obtain it? I will never predict the highest case number. Actually, that's not true. I did last year. But I generally don't try and predict the highest case number. I'm not going to do that because on January 1, we get the real data. And so, we'll have the highest case number then. If you mean, what's the highest case number that will go current? Well, we'll know that much later, sort of 10 or 11 months from now, because many things can happen in the next 10 or 11 months, right? My lawyer is advising me to both a job offer and I-134. Should I be worried if I don't manage to get the job offer? No. Your lawyer's an idiot. Here we go. Lawyers, why have you got a lawyer is the first question. Like, why are you using a lawyer? Doesn't make any sense. You don't need to use a lawyer unless you've got something weird about your case. I assume you're doing adjustment of status, but if you're doing consular processing and you've got a lawyer, you're a nut. You're just wasting money. But let's say you're doing adjustment of status. Well, if you can get a job offer that's real, genuine, then yeah, okay, a job offer will help. But the I-134 is enough. So I don't know why he's told you to get both. I mean, that just seems a bit silly. But anyway, I've heard many case number over 100,000 here and 100% confirmed until 140 to 143. Really surprised. Thank you for that information. I'd love to get pictures of some of those letters, preferably with the barcode. If it's on there, I think it's on there this year. There on the "You've been selected" letters, there was usually a barcode, and I can read the barcode. So that would give me comfort that you've got the case number that is shown on there, right? There was a Selectee letter the other day being thrown around with the case number of 6,600,000 or something. 6 million. I don't think it was real. I think it was faked, but it was kind of interesting. But anyway, I don't always believe a photo, because if I did believe a photo, then I would think there was a 6 million case number, which is not true. Any idea about how many visas still available for DV 2023? I have an interview on the 20th of this month. 20th of August, you're probably safe. It's unlikely that visas will run out between now and the 20th of August. There are still several thousand visas left. The cases I'm more concerned about are those that are on 221G or have September interviews. I think those are the two sort of risk points, and any other remaining adjustment to status cases. Hello, Britt from Uganda. During my application by default, I was allocated to the Nairobi embassy. Yeah, Nairobi is an important embassy. If they don't do their work this year, then that's a problem. While filling my DS260, I changed interview location to Rwanda. Is there any problem? So what will happen is they'll ignore your choice of Rwanda, probably, unless you're physically closer to Rwanda. Is that possible? My geography is kind of crap. But if you're in Uganda, you're supposed to be interviewed in Nairobi. That's going to be the embassy you are allocated to. Now, Rwanda would be a better embassy for you. So if you've got justification because of physical proximity, or because you, let's say, you commonly go to Rwanda for work, you're there all the time, something like that. If there's a good reason for you to say Rwanda, then contact KCC and explain that to them. If, on the other hand, it's simply that you want to swap your embassy to Rwanda and you've got no real justification, then don't contact KCC asking for an embassy change. Instead, move to Rwanda and and let KCC know. OC405X, no hope here. Yeah, I'm afraid you're done. Cooked. I'm from Africa, but wanted to be interviewed in Germany. My case number 16,000. When should I expect an interview? Okay, do you live in Germany? If you live in Germany, they'll interview you in Germany. If you don't live in Germany, they won't interview you in Germany. It's simple as that. When would you expect an interview? November, December, maybe. Do you think the case number 31800 is safe? Don't know exactly. Probably yes, but I'm not 100% sure. But bearing in mind 32,000 went current in DV 2023, seems likely that 31800 would go current in DV 2024, right? 47K, no question there. I won 2024 South America, Peru. My number is 32XX. Do I have a chances? Yeah, you got a chance. Simon, we can't read fonts in the screen. Minimize it so that you can read it. Can you minimize it so we can read it? Oh, what's going on there? You can't read that? Wait to minimize it? Oh. Let me just make this a little bit different size. And let me minimize it a little bit. Maybe that's easier. Okay, try that. Do you think over-selection of Oceania is partly to meet up with the fairness of missed opportunities in Africa and other regions? Doesn't make any sense. How would that meet up with the fairness of missed opportunity. Doesn't make any sense. But fundamentally, why have they over-selected this much in Oceania? I have no idea. If you can come up with a better explanation of your theory than what you just wrote, by all means write that. But I have no idea what you think is the connection between AF region and Oceania region, and a 77% increase in Oceania makes no sense to me. My name is Emmanuel. My case number is 28K from Ghana. Filled in May 7th, very fast. So do I go current, or what are my chances? Right, so at 28,000, your case number is good, but you're inaccurate. So, there will be a question of whether ACRA is scheduling enough interviews for you to be able to get current. So that's going to be your thing. It's going to be about that. Okay. I'll take a couple more questions and I think we'll be done. I'm been talking long enough. Any advantage for people already living in the US with a valid status? Yes, you can do adjustment of status in the USA, which is a different entirely process to consular processing. It's got some pros, it's got some cons. I'm not saying it's better or worse, but I did it. I did it that way, right? So I chose adjustment of status over consular processing. So, up to you. Okay. All right. Let's just see if there's any other good questions here. 52K Romania, what do you think? It's a little bit risky based on the numbers we're hearing, right? AF 60K, not in Nairobi. Yeah, it's a bit risky because you're in Nairobi and you're at 60K. So your case number shouldn't be a problem, but because you're in Nairobi, you've got a problem. Yeah. Unless they suddenly change their behavior. Highest case in AS is 52K and 28K selectees, so 50% holds. No. So 52K, yes. 28,000 selectees, yes. But that means that there's going to be about 14,000 cases. So 14,000 cases in 52,000 case numbers, that means there's about 75% holds, right? That's what that means. So as AS 19K has 19 selectees, and yeah, I think you were confused because you didn't figure out the difference between selectee numbers and case numbers, right? So 28,000 selectees, 27,960 is probably 14,000 cases approximately in Asia. And that's spread over 52,000 case numbers in Asia, right? So, yeah. Yeah, Morocco didn't get any September interviews. It was a bit weird, but they had done well up until that point. So I don't think they're going to get any. Same as what I mentioned for Colombo earlier. AF5K, good number. In ACRA, would you advise transfer? No. No. AF5K in ACRA, as long as you filled out your DS260 very fast, like, in the early days of May, as soon as you found out you were a selectee, and as long as you're reasonably easy to process, then you're absolutely golden. You don't need to, you certainly don't need to transfer. Don't mess with your case, right? You'll be okay in ACRA. Why Bulletin for you didn't move from 32K 3 months in a row? Because they had enough selectees. They've already got, in DV2023, they've got enough people. They're able to meet the quota. Why would they increase it? They had enough people. This should be clear to you by now. We're 18 months into the process on DV 2023. Almost 18 months. You should be able to know. Drinking the best coffee your wife's made. Yeah, my wife's back. Thank you. And so, yeah, better coffee. I made coffee one day when I went online. I don't know how I screwed it up. I put way too little coffee in there, so it was so weak. It was awful. Never mind. Thanks for your work. What about 70K in Africa? Do you have a chance in the current bulletin? Current bulletin. So again, don't take the current bulletin as being indicative of where we're going to get to in the year. That's got nothing to do with it. So don't talk to me about what the current bulletin says, meaning do you have a chance based on the first bulletin. It's the first bulletin of 12. It's got nothing to do with the end game, right? Out of curiosity, what's the picture on the desk behind you? That's my wedding picture of me and my beautiful wife. Oh, let's show you. Why not? My wife and I in Maui, in Hawaii. We got married in Hawaii. And for those of you that just looked at my wife's picture and realized she's much more beautiful than me, you're absolutely right. I hit one out of the park. Should we just say that? She's a beautiful woman. I don't know how I landed her. How many years ago? 25 years ago. Rwanda is actually near Uganda, just like Kenya. Yeah. So clarify what I just said. Yeah. So if you contact KCC and say, look, I've got to travel 1,000 miles to go to the embassy you're going to send me to, or 200 miles to the other embassy, I'm being stupid with the miles. But if you can make your explanation like that, then you could justify getting set up in Rwanda, right? So I'm sorry, I don't know the mileage. I don't know it depends on the travel. But if you explain that in the particular place where you live, there are good travel options for you to get to Rwanda, and it's much easier and it's much shorter and everything else, then you've got a good reason to say, don't send me to Nairobi, send me to Rwanda. Do that, okay? Is interview date linked to the DV completed date? Sort of. You mean the DS260 completed date? Well, so the day that you finish processing the DS260 can be important. It's a longer description, to be honest. I've got to revisit that and explain that a little bit better. But I put a video out that explains how AV queues are done probably about 2 to 3 months ago. So go on my channel, look at my back videos, and you'll see a video that's titled something like queue processing, how it works, something like that. Go and find that video. It will tell you a little bit more about how things work. Okay. Right. Is it possible to be approved on the same day as the interview? Yes, it is. What's the time expected for interview? Worth case number 19,000. Number of selectees and higher. Okay. 19,000 time of interview, probably spring of next year. Yes, there are more selectees. I've just spent an hour and a half talking about that. Last question. Let me see if I can find a fun or an interesting one. No is the answer. I can't find an interesting, different question. It's a shame. Let me go and just delve into one. Last question then. I filled out the EDV application twice. I was selected in one, but not in the other. Is there any problem if I fill out my DS260 now? Oh, God. If you've filled out multiple applications, firstly, you should have been disqualified already. But if they didn't disqualify you, then there's a high chance they'll disqualify you at the interview process. So if they can work out that these 2 applications, if you really did make 2 applications, then yeah, you could be disqualified. Now, I'm not saying that if you were a main selectee on your own application and you were also added to your wife's application, that's not multiple entries. But if you put 2 in your name where you're the person applying, and you use a similar photo, then you're going to get caught. I wouldn't even fill in the DS260. Just wouldn't do it. Fausto, good to see you on here as well. Best of luck for those waiting for interviews. Yeah, indeed. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there with your handsome picture there, Fausto. Okay, everybody, thanks for joining me today. We're at an hour and a half, so I appreciate your time. I've got to get back and do some work into the night. I've got to actually earn my living, and so I've got to get back to that. But Appreciate you joining me. Please do subscribe to the channel. Give me a thumbs up, like. It's disgraceful only 28 people have liked this video. Come on, you can do better than that. Give me a like right now, and make sure you're subscribed and get notifications so you get more information like this. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye now.